This is a special Fly Fishing Founders episode where you hear behind-the-scenes stories from the companies who are going all in on fly fishing. This week we have the Gray Drake with Dan Gates.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today. We'll help you on your fly fishing journey with classic stories covering steelhead fishing, fly tying, and much more.
How's it going, everyone? Thanks for stopping by the Fly Fishing Show. Interested in going on a hosted fly fishing trip with yours truly and a few of the great guests from the podcast? Go to wetflyswing.com/destination to get more info and reserve a spot. Or just click the link in the show notes and that'll get you started. That's wetflyswing.com/DESTI Nation. In today's episode, I talk with Dan Gates, the founder of the Gray Drake. We talk about how the idea of creating a retro fly wallet and company in the fly fishing space came to be, his upcoming Trout Spey guide trip season, and his passion for steelhead. Dan shares a link to a musician and leather worker that's helping him to get the company going. And we're going to talk all these things and a bunch more today, so stay tuned. And without further ado, here's Dan Gates from the Gray Drake. How's it going, Dan?
Hey, Dave. Doing well. How are you doing today?
Good. Yeah, we I guess we've been talking about this for a little while. You've been on as a sponsor of the podcast, and we're kind of just jumping fully into this. I wanted to hear your story and maybe shed some light on what you have going and the products and stuff you have going in the fly fishing space. But before we get there, maybe just talk about how you first got into fly fishing.
Yeah, for sure. So I got into fly fishing when I was 10 or 11. My parents are both in the medical field. My dad's a pediatrician. My mom was a nurse. So every year they used to have to, I grew up in Idaho, and we used to have to go to this conference in the fall over in Sun Valley, and they needed something to do with me for the day. And I saw an ad for like a kid's fly fishing class and didn't really know what it was, but it kind of seemed cool. And so they signed me up for that, and it was kind of love at first sight. They took me out to a stocked pond, I think at like the gun club in Sun Valley, and I caught a bunch of fat rainbows. So I was pretty hooked from the beginning. But I grew up in southeast Idaho, so fishing the Henry's Fork and the South Fork and like the waters of the Yellowstone National Park and all that stuff. So I kind of was introduced to fly fishing and kind of the best place for trout fishing anyway out west. Mm-hmm. So it's been kind of a passion for a while now.
Yeah, that's great. And then, so the Gray Drake. So when did you kind of start thinking about having a product of your own?
Yeah, so that was we started that in 2014, and basically that was I was up late one night and just kind of thinking that I wanted to be involved in the fly fishing space. I've worked in the outdoor industry for quite a while through different companies, ski companies and online retailers and stuff like that, and guided a bit in the past, and just kind of wanted to do something on my own. And I've always been kind of a nerd for more like vintage tackle and just kind of the direction that the fly fishing industry was going. I wanted to offer something a little bit different. And that's really, really how it was born.
Right. Yeah. So the vintage tackle thing, and that's what you're, basically the fly wallets, and they're old school. And I'm not sure who else is doing those out there anymore, but I don't remember seeing those around much since when I was a kid. I'm sure there's probably some other things out there, but on the outdoor industry now, what companies or what were you doing now? So it was just skiing mostly?
Yeah, so I worked for a company called backcountry.com for a really long time.
Oh, yeah. They're big.
Yeah. So I kind of got a job there. I moved to Salt Lake, which is where I'm at now from Idaho, to go to college. I went to the University of Utah, and backcountry was kind of a seasonal job that I stumbled into as like a warehouse worker, drove the forklifts, and basically kind of stuck around and worked my way up into helping build a sales program there. And so I did about 8 years of backcountry, which was great. And through that, met a lot of contacts in the outdoor world, and also worked for a smaller ski company called Volet, in Salt Lake when I first moved here.
Yeah, they make goggles, right?
So that's Vole. This is Vole.
Oh.
Really similar names.
Oh, really?
Vole makes like avalanche shovels and telemark ski gear and stuff like that.
Okay. What's the difference between? It's interesting because I've had a little background in the outdoor space as well, and it's a lot bigger. I mean, what do you see the difference between fly fishing and the outdoor space? How much bigger? Is it just no comparison, or how's that all work out? Because you're trying to make a business online, and I'd imagine there's some struggles there.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. For example, when I first kind of started at Backcountry and was working as a gearhead, which is basically like their customer service, there was only a handful of people there that fly fished. And so if a customer, and we didn't really sell fly fishing gear back then.
No.
It was kind of its own, separate thing. And then we started getting in a few brands. Like I think we brought on Redington maybe first, and Sage. And so we started getting some fly fishing customers, and it was really kind of this unknown thing. And then it was just like overnight, everyone fly fished. It's like fly fishing hit this kind of like boom.
When was
5
that?
or 6 years ago.
Okay.
I would say 5 or 6 years ago. And
so back in like 2012.
Yeah, like 2011, 2012, 2013, somewhere in there. And so it was kind of interesting to watch that transformation, because in my mind, they were the like mainstream outdoor industry and fly fishing were kind of two separate worlds. And now they're much more intertwined.
Oh, and where did that come from? Because you think of, we hear on this show a lot about the 1992, probably, a long time ago, but, with the river runs through it. And
sure.
So, I mean, what was the 2012? Do you have any idea why the boom there?
No, I don't know. I mean, I have some theories, but it's like, like I said, I've been fly fishing since I was a kid and like a total nerd about it. I've always just loved it. And so I remember, like in high school, it was kind of like all my friends would be like, "Oh, you fly fish? Like that's cool, I guess." Like my dad fly fishes, but it wasn't like people were like, "Oh man, like I want to come fishing with you." Where, kind of around that time period.
And
go ahead.
How old are you, Dan?
Yeah, so I'm 31.
Okay, 31. Yeah, cool. So that gives us some perspective. So 31. So yeah, you're let's see, you're probably so you're mid 2000s for like high school, right?
Yeah, graduated high school in 2006.
Yeah.
So like flash forward to kind of like 2012, and all of a sudden it's like people are like, "Oh, you fly fish? Like, let's go out, like take me out, show me how." So I don't know what the shift was. I think it was, I think a big part of it is, kind of mid to late 2000s, the fly fishing film tour really kind of got up and running, and there was this whole the fly fishing industry started to mimic the ski industry. Fly fishing became this like action sport, like quote unquote, and so I think that was really it just became Tom By and all the other people that the magazines kind of came in strong, and it seems like things changed that 10-year periods. There was some big differences. I think it just became a little bit cooler for kind of the younger generation. And once you go a few times, you realize it's a pretty damn good time. So it wasn't long before a lot of people were hooked.
Yeah. Okay. So it gives us some perspective. And backcountry.com is obviously, they've got to be one of the biggest kind of online retailers, right, out there?
Yeah, for sure. Most years they are. There's a few other ones out there, but it's a massive operation.
Gotcha. Well, that's cool. So you have a similar, I mean, you've loved fly fishing since you were a kid, and I love the throwback because I was just kind of listening to it as a podcast. It was April Vokey who was interviewing Joan Wulff, who I actually have coming up. I'm going to be interviewing Joan Wulff here in a whatever it is, a couple months and it's pretty challenging because it's like, okay, I got Joan Wulff coming out. She's 92.
Right.
She's this kind of bigger than life figure. And I'm like, okay, I can't screw that up. I want to make sure to ask the right questions. And they were talking about, just the whole history thing, right? So, I mean, who were some of your mentors? I mean, do you have like these big throwback kind of old school people that kind of inspired these classic, or where did this classic fly wallet stuff come from? Yeah.
So, I definitely had, some personal mentors, that kind of took me under their wing growing up. This guy named Al Bridwell, he was just a local in Rexburg, Idaho, where I grew up, but he really took me under his wing and and he was a retired Marine. And so he had days off and my dad was working. And so he would take me out to the river during the days in the summer. And then, my dad would, my family didn't fly fish at all before I got into it. So I kind of like got my whole family into it. So my dad would come out, when he was off work, and we'd all fish together. But through Al, I really kind of like was introduced into this whole fly fishing world. And the Henry's Fork, I don't know how much you know about it, but it's pretty renowned as kind of this world famous, a really technical dry fly river. And it has, out of all the rivers I've ever fished for trout anyway, it has the most distinct culture. And that river in itself to me is kind of like a throwback. It's different than a lot of other rivers out west. And so I think just growing up around that culture and kind of in the fly shops up in Last Chance, Idaho, really kind of is what planted that seed of kind of like the throwback. I don't know, like when I picture fly fishing, I still picture the late 90s. Like when I was a kid, like that's the image that comes to mind. And
and that's kind of the river runs through it again. Going back to that, you think about when that movie was set. It was set in the whatever it was. The early days, right?
Right.
Yeah, back where people smoke cigarettes and all that stuff.
Yeah. So, I don't know. And then one of my early, I'm also heavily involved in fly tying, and I tied kind of the expo show circuit, since I was young as well. And, I met Syl Nemes, who was, a big proponent of the soft hackle. And I just thought he was this cool old guy. And he was super nice to me when I was a kid, and gave me a couple of his books and some of his flies. And like I said, I was a nerd. Well, I still am a nerd, but was a total nerd. And I was a little kid for fly fishing, and, would read books cover to cover. And so I read his book on soft hackles, and I've always just kind of had a soft spot for fishing and swinging soft hackles. And so I think all that together is just kind of where the whole aesthetic of the gray drake and the fly wallets and some of the fly box stuff we're doing these days that's really where it came from. And my inspiration for that is, there was because so many people got into fly fishing in, 2010 forward, they think it's this kind of fast paced, action sport. And there's this whole other side to it. And that other side to it to me is the real joy of fly fishing.
That is kind of interesting, that whole action sport thing, because, you're totally right. Yeah. I'm not sure the Fly Fish Journal, I think Steve Duda and folks like that came from and a lot of people I talked to, in fly fishing, they had some skiing background. So you definitely have that, but when you talk to people, obviously that know what fly fishing's about, it's about kicking back and relaxing. It's not about, getting the numbers, although that's something, I've been in that game too before, where you're kind of this numbers game. But yeah, you're right. It's more of the slower pace. Do you think it's more of a younger generation thing still that people are doing that? Or they kind of have to
I think so. Yeah. I think it's generational. I also think it's just kind of like the life cycle of the angler. When you start, you want to catch every fish you can. And then once you kind of move on from that, it's like you figure out what you kind of like and what you don't like. And I think for a lot of people, it is super attractive to, especially these days, throwing big articulated streamers and stuff like that is kind of in the spotlight. And that's cool. I've definitely done that, but not my preferred method of fly fishing. But I think that's super exciting for a lot of people. It's really visual, or, if they just want to catch a lot of fish, especially where I'm at in Utah, it's a lot of nymphing on tailwaters. And so, it's just people have limited amounts of time and they want to capitalize on that time. And the best way is to, drop a couple beadhead nymphs below an indicator and fish a hole over and over. And you're pretty much guaranteed to catch a couple fish. But
yeah. So the nymphing are you doing more like the Euro nymphing or more just traditional nymphing?
Yeah, so I really don't nymph a whole lot. I don't have anything against it necessarily, but I don't really do the Euro nymphing thing too much. I did have this brief interlude with Tenkara, I will say, where I got really into Tenkara fishing for a little bit.
Yeah.
Which Utah is actually perfectly suited for that, because most of our water is is small and medium sized rivers. Besides the Green, we don't really have any what I would consider large water.
Yep.
And so, yeah, Tenkara, you know, unless you're fishing a dry fly on it, like you're basically Euro nymphing, and it's super effective in that way. So I did that for a little while, and yeah, I mean, it's incredibly effective. You know, you can go out to a tailwater, and if you're fishing in a little bit different way, kind of Euro nymphing, or, you know, whether it's on a Euro nymphing rig or a Tenkara, I mean, you can you can clean up, you can catch quite a few fish, but you know, I did that, and that was cool. But yeah, I generally don't nymph a whole lot.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, no, this is good. I noticed, and I didn't realize, I mean, sounds like you have some guiding experience. And I think on your website, you still have a Trout Spey guiding, service that you do. So, yeah, maybe we'll dig into that a little bit. Something that this popped out, you know, and you sent me a couple of your shirts and stuff like that, which I love, you know, the quality and kind of, you know, the stuff you have going. They're good stuff. I did notice, I think you have a sticker that says, "No one cares that you're a guide."
Yeah.
And what's that all about? Because that kind of sounds like, I'm not sure what that actually is. Can you explain what that little bumper sticker is all about?
Yeah, sure. That one's got me in some trouble.
Bet,
so
yeah.
It's basically it's yeah. So I would never really say, you know, like I'm a guide. I've guided for a decade, but it's always been kind of a part-time job, and you know, picking up trips here and there. Utah is very relaxed on who can be a guide, and that's kind of the background for the sticker.
Anybody.
Like
so you don't
Idaho,
need a guide's license?
Not so much. Like in Idaho, you have to guide underneath an outfitter, and it's very regulated. There's hardly any, you know, it's pretty much impossible to get like a new outfitter's license. But in Utah, you can kind of freelance guide, and you can work for several different outfitters, and it's because we're doing like I said, the majority of the water in Utah is small. Most of it's not from a boat; it's all walk and wade, so you don't need like a captain's license or anything like that. So yeah, it's very easy to become a guide. And so when I moved here, you know, I kind of realized that and needed some summer work, and so I've basically been on rotation for 5 or 6 different companies here, just picking up trips. And, you know, like I said, it's super fun. I enjoy guiding. I love teaching people how to fly fish, but I would never consider myself like a full-time guide, because there are guys out there, you know, buddies of mine that are out there grinding every single day. And I have the utmost respect for them, because it's a tough gig to do. But the background of the sticker is basically, with this whole, you know, in a way, it's kind of like bringing in the ski, like bra culture of, you know, just like, I'm so cool, I'm a guide, you know. It's just kind of like, well, like, no one cares, man. Like, let's just all relax. Like, so it really, what it comes from is, there's an old sticker that used to be on a lot of cars in Salt Lake that says, "No one cares that you ski at Alta." Because people used to have Alta stickers all over their cars.
That one makes sense. I mean, because I haven't even skied Alta, but I just know exactly what that means. It means like nobody cares that you, you know, I don't know, whatever, that, you know, you have a ton of money, that you're this awesome person, you know, nobody cares. That makes sense.
Yeah. So that's basically where that sticker came from. And, yeah, so a lot of people get it. Most people have loved it and think it's hilarious. And most of the stickers I've sold, that sticker was made as a kind of we donated all the proceeds from that sticker to, Wild Steelheaders United, with Trout Unlimited last year. So it's just, kind of like a tongue-in-cheek funny sticker. You know, some guys got pissed off, but it's the ones that were pissed off are basically the ones that kind of need to read the sticker.
Yeah, that's it. Nice. So it actually works. So basically, the people that are actually the full-time guides and they're grinding it out, they read that and they're like, yeah, it doesn't really matter, it doesn't affect them. But the people that it affects are the people that are actually the bros, right? The people that are saying it. Yeah, I gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. No, I mean, I think some of the stuff sometimes, you know, I think it's good to have that, right? Because you're stopping people and making them think about it. You know, if you just said if you said it some other way, maybe you wouldn't get you wouldn't get your message out there. But it sounds like your message is getting out there.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. And you know, maybe I'll just take this moment to clarify. Like, as someone that's dipped their toe in the guiding world, you know, like I said, I have the utmost respect for people that are doing it for their full-time profession. You know, hats off to you. So definitely no disrespect, just kind of a tongue-in-cheek funny thing.
No, I hear you. Yeah, and you just said, it's easy to be a guide. That's I guess true in Utah, but it's not easy to be a good guide, you know. And And I've
Right.
I've had some experience guiding as well, and it's not easy, man. It's not an easy job at all. I mean, anybody who's like a full-time guide is, my hat's off to them, because that's a full-time job.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, like I said, I mean, this year I've probably done, just a handful of trips, maybe like a dozen or so or less. And in addition to the gray drake, I also work a full-time job with a tech company right now. So, it's, any given week, I'm, anywhere between 60 and 90 hours. And
wow,
there's some guys that just spend that. I know some guys here in Utah that will spend that amount of time just on the water guiding every week. And that's brutal. So,
oh my gosh. So you do 60 to 90 hours in your kind of day job, and then you also and still do the gray drake on the side?
Well, no, that 60 to 90 hours is like everything, like all encompassing.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes sense.
I'd be dead. Otherwise.
Yeah. I was going to say that's okay. You'd be, yeah. Okay. But yeah, so, I mean, how has that been with the gray drake? You've been since 2014. I mean, what are your plans here? Are you planning on hopefully taking this as like a full-time thing, or is this more of a side gig, or, what are you looking at here?
Yeah, so I mean, I would love to be able to do it as a full-time thing, but honestly, right now it's really just more of a passion project. It's the main goal of it is pretty, I haven't made $1 off of it basically, as a business model. It's really not the best one, but I pretty much donate, we cover the cost of, our material costs and whatnot. And then we pretty much donate all the proceeds to different conservation groups. And so, in the past, we've donated to groups like Utah Stream Access Coalition, which works super hard at preserving public access on Utah waters. We've donated, like I said, to Wild Steelheaders United and different Trout Unlimited groups. So, that for me, it's kind of all about giving back. I think it's cool if, I'm surprised that anyone is interested in our stuff. It's always humbling to every time an order comes through to kind of think that someone out there thinks it's cool, but ultimately the goal is kind of making gear that lasts a bit longer than some of the stuff that's on the market, and being good stewards of our environment and the sport, and then giving back where we can. So as long as I'm able to do those three at kind of whatever size, I'll be happy.
That's cool. Yeah, it's pretty awesome because right now you're a sponsor on the show, and the other, one currently is Deli Fresh Design, which is also a small company. And the cool thing is, Ross has the same ethic. I mean, obviously a lot of people doing fly fishing, they understand conservation. If without conservation, you don't even have fish. So, but I think, it sounds like you and Ross are taking it a step above, where he's doing the same thing. I mean, all of his products are, or some of them are recycled materials, and, he's talking about all this stuff. I mean, you basically, I think you have a new fly box out, right? That's kind of using some of that. How are you trying to, with that conservation message, how are you doing that with your products?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it's a complex one. We're basically trying to do things like, the fly wallets are super cool. An acquaintance actually sews all those up by hand. Hence why they're kind of pricey. It's really, there's hundreds of hours put into those wallets.
So those are all handmade in like the US?
Yeah. They're sewn by one guy. His name's Matt Codina. He's actually not a fly fisherman, but he's an amazing leather worker and an incredible musician. You can look up on Instagram. His Instagram's Matt Codina Leather.
How do you spell Codina?
Codina.
Okay.
And a buddy of mine knew him, and he was like, "Hey, my friends wanted to do these fly wallet things," and so he's like, "Yeah, I'd love to sew those up. That seems like a great idea." And they're incredible. Like when you actually kind of see them in hand, especially the bigger size one, it's double lined with calf skin on the inside, and there's not a nicer wallet out there. I can pretty much promise you that.
Who else? Are there other like similar fly wallets out there?
So there's a few. You can hop on like Etsy and find a bunch, and then I'm not sure like what level he's still doing it, but around the same time the gray drake started, there was a guy, and I don't remember where he's from. I want to say maybe East Coast somewhere. It was called Finn, Finn. Gotcha. And he was making some pretty cool like canvas wallet stuff. And
but there aren't any of the big companies aren't really doing it.
No, not so much. I mean, it's hard, unless you want to do kind of a cheaper wallet, it's hard. I mean, the trick with the gray drake is, like who's going to drop $200 on a leather fly wallet, right? Like it's a pretty narrow demographic of people that are kind of willing to do that. And it's not that beginning angler that, that started in 2012, they're not quite there yet.
No.
But anyway, yeah, back to your question, the stuff we're doing with the fly boxes is, one day I was kind of organizing my gear and realized I had like 8 or 9 fly boxes that have just been kicking around and are all beat up. And, they're everything from like the old school plastic foam boxes to kind of like the newer silicone, rubber injected, whatever. And, like they're cool, but they get so beat up looking and they don't really they don't age well. And then I just realized it's an incredible amount of, fly fishing. And like you said, we have to be conservation minded because it's just everywhere, especially if you fish for steelhead or salmon. I mean, it's not the most optimistic sport right now. So, I think people have that conservation ethic, but then when you look at the actual sort of fly fishing, there's an incredible amount of plastic and just kind of overuse of materials that really kind of goes against that conservation ethic. And so,
it's like the plastic, it's like the plastic straws, ban the straw or whatever, that movement. It's like the oceans, the pile of plastic in the ocean, right?
Right. And, it's look, I would love to be the dude that can kind of exist in his own little ecosystem and ride his bike everywhere, but that's just not the reality. I'm in my car driving up to Idaho pretty much every weekend. And
that's actually Ross. I don't know if
I listened to that and I was like, man, that guy's gonna put me to shame.
No, I mean, nobody could. I mean, I think he's at the extreme level. Actually, and to clear the slate, Ross does have a car now. He's traveling across the country, so he's not fully hippified. I just got back from we went to the Oregon Country Fair. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Yeah, so the Oregon Country Fair is this full on, basically this hippie event that's been going on for years and years. And, that's what it is. It's all these people that are basically, kind of doing all that, right? Living, as frugally as possible. Kind of my picture of it is the deadheads, right?
Yeah,
people that just travel around in buses. So that's kind of what it is, an event where everybody comes together. But yeah, Ross is the extreme. So that's hard to get to that level where you don't have a car and you're riding a bike. But other than that, it sounds like you are doing what you can. And now the wild steer. So you're Henry's Fork in that area, Idaho, you must have fished for some steelhead before you left to Utah.
Yeah. So actually one of the biggest regrets of my early fly fishing life is, we always heard about steelhead, and we actually drove over. Like I said, I learned to fly fish in Sun Valley, which, is an hour from some great steelhead water.
Is that the clear water, or what's
the salmon? Oh,
the salmon. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was always out there. We actually drove out to the river, my dad and I, one time, and bought some 8-weight rods, and we were going to do it. And we just never really did it when we were little. And the steelhead returns are actually kind of decent. I mean, there were some pretty low years back then too, but it wasn't until much later that I really got into. I didn't really go on my first steelheading trip until 2012.
Yep.
And that's really when I
got the bug.
I got my first. I did my first spey casting lesson much earlier, probably I don't know, mid 2000s sometimes, and was kind of messing around with the spey rod and really liked that. And went out to Washington and saw the Olympic Peninsula for the first time and caught my first steelhead on the Sol Duck summer run. And it was pretty much over after that. I've been pretty hooked since then.
So yeah, the steelhead bug, obviously it takes a hold of a lot of people. And that's awesome, man. I mean, you got your whole life ahead of you now to dial it in, but you're in Utah. So do you still get out and do some steelheading, regularly, or are you planning on heading back to more steelhead country?
Yeah, I mean, I try to take a couple trips a year. The salmon up in Idaho really isn't too far. It's 5.5 hours, 5 hours.
Oh, yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah. So, that's the cool thing about that is that's 900 miles from the ocean. So the steelhead have taken one of the most amazing migrations in the natural world to get to that point. So it's pretty incredible. They've had horrible return numbers the past year or two.
Yeah, they have.
And there's very few wild fish left. It's mainly a hatchery thing, which is kind of a whole nother a whole nother can of worms. But that's the closest Steelhead water, so that's feasible to get up to on kind of a 3-day weekend. But yeah, I try to get out. I spent 4 or 5 days up on the Olympic Peninsula this spring, and yeah, I'll try to get out somewhere this fall.
Gotcha.
I'm going back to Nova Scotia for some Atlantic salmon this fall, so that might be my fall trip. But.
Oh, cool. Right on. So is that, I mean, if you had to look at I ran this survey to see kind of what the dream trip or, your must do trip is that you maybe haven't done. Is that, do you have that in your mind, or is that a steelhead trip, or is that Atlantic salmon, or is that something else?
Right now it's probably steelhead. I mean, there's a lot of fishing out there, and I'd love to do most of it, but I think just because steelhead, and I don't know if it's just the urgency around, I think we're watching some rivers really lose. We're actually watching the decline happen right now, and it's most likely they won't come back in those rivers. So I think there's kind of this urgency in my mind to go fish some of these rivers that still have decent runs and kind of do it while you can, because it's, who knows what it's going to look like in 50 years.
Yeah. No, there's definitely plenty of challenges, especially as I don't think our population is turning the other way, right? We're not, we're
No.
still increasing. So that's always the struggle, is that, man, you look at it, you're like, okay, so we're going to keep putting more people on the planet, and, the water temperatures are still going to, probably go up because we're going to use more water. And, I mean, I know it is this ball thing that's like, man, how do you do it? But I think how you do it is, like what you're doing. I mean, people that buy your fly wallets, they know that when they buy your fly wallet, some of that money goes to, the Steelheaders United, goes to protecting the resources. And, at the bottom line, you might not think, you might not realize it, but the small group, right? I mean, Rachel Carson, all that other stuff started with this, one person. And,
Right.
I mean, it might seem dim, but I mean, that's the thing, man, just keep people going. So I think that's what's cool about what you have, what you have going, there for sure. Looking at, just what you have, obviously you're thinking of, you've got a great thing going here. What is, the guiding in your home water? So do you consider it more, is your home water steelhead water, or do you kind of consider it more of a trout water out of Utah?
Yeah, definitely trout water. And guiding, you brought up the Trout Spey thing. That's actually something we just barely launched. And so what we're kind of offering is, and I'll be doing all those trips for now, is basically kind of a hybrid of like a short guided trip and a Trout Spey lesson. There's Trout Spey is kind of growing in popularity, and it's something I picked up maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I think it's super fun and a really effective way to fish. But it's still pretty unknown to a lot of people, and can be really intimidating in terms of all the different lines and everything that are out there right now.
Yeah.
So the idea is, we'll just kind of take people out. These are all kind of like evening trips to avoid some of the other recreational traffic on the rivers that we have out here, all the tubers and rafters and stuff like that. And just spend an evening learning how to swing flies on a 2-handed rod and hopefully catch some trout in the process. So that's kind of the guiding program that we just launched. But what I've done in the past, it's all on the same rivers. It's the 2 biggest rivers near Salt Lake are the Provo and the Weber. Both are decent rivers. They're kind of mid-size. They have a ton of fish for their size, and the Provo gets hammered. I mean, it is overfished, but it still produces, and it's everyone's kind of fishing it the same way. So when there's a handful of guys out there that you'll see with the Trout Spey rod or swinging flies, but it's kind of like one person's doing that for every 100 or 200 that are fishing an indicator, and the fish respond really well. You can go through a riffle swinging flies and pick up 10 or 15 fish, and the same guy will come through with an indicator, and they just the fish have seen that so many times. They're a little bit gun shy. So sometimes it's just about giving them something different. But so we're fishing those rivers, and it's all kind of rainbow and brown trout. If you're lucky, there's still a few cutthroat around in those streams. But Utah has an incredible amount of water to fish. They're just you just have to adjust your expectations for the amount of people on the rivers, and then kind of the size of the rivers.
Gotcha. Yeah, the Trout Spey, I had John McCloskey on. He's a he's a guide over, he fishes the Naknek in Alaska, like kind of half-time there. And he's in Georgia, and he's saying in Georgia, there's just nobody's doing it there at all. Right?
Yeah.
Even more so. No, he's like the only guy, but he was talking about these flies and how he was kind of downscaling stuff from Steelhead. I mean, you basically, what are the flies you're using? Do you have a couple of flies that, you go to for the Trout Spey stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So, I think it can be really attractive for people to downscale from their Steelhead gear. That's definitely what I did initially. The first Trout Spey rod I had was like a 5-weight switch rod, and now I'm mainly fishing 2 and 3-weight Trout Spey rods. So you kind of do this evolution of downsizing, and in the process, you kind of, I started off mainly throwing like a sink tip and swinging a streamer. And now these days I'm mainly fishing like a 2-weight Trout Spey set up with a Scandi line and just a 9-foot tapered leader and swinging a little soft tackle. And that's mainly what cool. I'm fishing the majority of the time.
Yep.
I've got different setups, little Skagit heads, so you can swing, light bigger sink stuff. Tips and get a streamer down when needed, which is super fun in the spring or fall, or if the water's high.
Yep. So you're just swinging old school, kind of just basically wet fly swing, right?
Yeah, for sure. So mainly like I kind of have 3 or 4 flies that I fish with a lot. One of them is, there's a streamer called the Platte River Spider, which is kind of a variation of the Platte River Special, just kind of tied almost like Steelhead style. It's basically just a big marabou spider, tied on like a size 6 or 8, streamer hook, and kind of in yellow and brown and olive. So it's a deadly brown trout fly in the fall for sure. So that one's great, but it's unweighted, which is the real beauty of it. So if you just have kind of a light sink tip or like an intermediate tip on, that fly fishes really well. So if I'm going to fish kind of a streamer, that's one of my go-tos. And then just your classic like partridge and orange, I fish a lot. And then just some other soft hackles. And then I love summer evenings when there's a good caddis hatch. It's super fun to kind of grease up like a Goddard caddis or any other kind of caddis pattern and skate that. And that can be super effective as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's awesome. Man, I forget sometimes, the wet fly swing, the name of the podcast, because that's kind of how I first came up with that name. It was just, for me, it's kind of a throwback as well. I love the old school, and wet fly swing. It's just kind of, obviously there's the Steelhead part of it, but it's also for me just, that's kind of how I learned as well. Just, basically swinging wet flies. And I love that whenever I think about it, it's like, don't forget about, where you came from, the old stuff, because you're a nymphing and there's tons of amazing stuff. That's a lot of fun and it's all great. But, we learn from somebody, and then they learn from somebody, and there's this cool history in fly fishing. So I think it's awesome that you're, that's part of your thing as well. So let's just stay on the 222 thing. So you got, the 2 flies. Do you have a couple of tips? I mean, obviously, let's just talk about Trout Spey. When you get somebody new, where do you start them? And do you have a couple of tips to help them get into fish on the wet fly swing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the biggest tip of Trout Spey is don't overcomplicate it. It can be a lot to absorb at first, but there's some good resources online. Anyone can shoot me an email off the Grey Drake website. I'm happy to answer questions. But even if you don't have the Trout Spey and you want to get into swinging flies, just pick like a size 12 partridge and orange, and don't do anything fancy, like just your standard 9-foot tapered leader. And just look for good water, shallow kind of knee-deep riffles that aren't too fast, and just start working your way down them. I mean, it's the beauty of swinging flies is it's really about the easiest method of fishing, and if you do that, you're going to get a couple grabs and you'll start to figure it out. From there, you can really start messing with the swing speed and, maybe adding a little action to the swing and mending to get the fly down or keep it swinging on the surface a little bit faster. But if you just, kind of fish down and across, the biggest thing I think is, if you're new to it, make sure you're at a point with your casting where you can get that leader to turn all the way over. You really need that to lay out straight. So it starts swinging almost immediately versus the fly, sinking down and with kind of a coiled up leader beneath the fly line. That's not going to be as effective. So I'd say that work on your casting to get that leader to turn over every time, and that's going to really help.
Okay, Great. And so do you have a couple of resources that you'd recommend if somebody, if they wanted to get into the Trout Spey or just really anything? And I guess we're talking about Utah. And you said the Provo is and what was the other river? The Provo out there, and the other one you fish?
Yeah, and then the Weber.
Oh yeah, the Weber, right. Are there any resources, kind of online, books, magazines, anything that might, provide some info on Trout Spey?
Yeah, there's a magazine called Swing the Fly.
Oh yeah.
That's a great resource, and they do some Trout Spey stuff, but there's just so much information just about kind of swinging the fly on both single and double hand rods in that magazine that you can kind of glean and incorporate into your Trout Spey world. There's also, local fly shops are great, and as more manufacturers are introducing Trout Spey stuff, kind of more people are becoming familiar with it, and so they can at least point you in the right direction. So I'd encourage you to check out your local fly shop. In the Salt Lake area, Western Rivers is kind of the leading fly shop, and they have an amazing staff that's well educated on that stuff.
Gotcha. What about a quick tip for somebody who maybe is a guy like yourself or a person that wants to start something like you have? Any tips for them, getting into the fly fishing space?
Yeah, it's be prepared for, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You can, we started this I had the luxury of, basically a buddy and I started this. It's all self-funded. I'm pretty much running it all at this point. So I don't have like investors that I really, owed money to right away the first year or two. And so I've been able to kind of take it at this like digestible pace. And, I've always worked another job, so I've never depended on, just sole income from this. So if you're gonna do it the sole income way, that's a pretty serious commitment. Yeah. But this day and age with the internet and just kind of the way things are, it's pretty easy to kind of, test the waters and see how much you want to commit to it. And, if I had more time and really wanted to drop more money into this, I could blow it out into kind of a bigger thing than it is. But I would say the two biggest tips are just, be prepared for what you're getting into. It can be a long process, and some you're going to have to put in some really long days. Yeah. But the second thing is there's so much information out there, even from when I started this, not that long ago to now. Just what you can do with Instagram and everything like that is we started basically right before Instagram really kind of took off as kind of a, the tool that it is now for businesses. And there's just so many resources out there, and I'm sure there's ones that I'm not even aware of right now that people are using and having success with. So do your homework and just kind of don't be afraid to put your head down and grind.
Cool. All right. Well, anything else we missed here? We've talked about what you have going. Anything else you want to share as far as, where you're headed maybe in the next, few months to a year? Anything new coming out?
Yeah, so besides the Trout Spey guided stuff, which we're super excited about, the next thing is we have a new box coming out, which is pretty cool. It kind of has like the old Wheatley style clips on one side, and then the other side's going to be our cork insert, which is kind of our effort to just take some of the plastic and foam and rubber out of the industry and put a more sustainable material in there, and every little bit helps. So we're excited about that box. That will be a perfect kind of that's the ideal Trout Spey or kind of like fall and summer run steelhead box.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And yeah, just as we wrap up here, a couple of quick questions I've been asking. One of them is I'm not sure, when you get off the river, say let's take us to that Steelhead River. So you do a little bit of winter and summer steelhead, or is it mostly summer?
Both.
Yeah, both. So let's go to, you're getting off of that summer steelhead trip. Maybe it's a nice warm, August day. What's your drink of choice in the evening?
Ooh, that's a good one. So, man, I would have to say in the summer on a hot summer evening, like a scotch and soda.
Oh, there you go. There you go. The scotch, man. That is, the scotch comes up quite a bit. It's pretty awesome.
It's intertwined with fly fishing for whatever reason.
That's what it is. And the cool thing about this is why it's old school, because it seems like I've talked to a number of European folks, and I just interviewed somebody who's over there, and again, Scotch came up, and it's I think that's part of it. You're keeping the tradition going on your drinks as well.
Yeah, nice.
Cool. All right. And what about music? Any band or types of music you listen to?
Yeah, I mean, I listen to this is the generic answer, but I listen to everything. I grew up in like this like kind of like punk and like hardcore world, so I listen to like a lot of punk music still, but these days I just listen to a lot of old country.
Okay. Yeah. What would be if you had to pick one old country?
Oh man, there's so many, but right now I'm really listening to a lot of Ernest Tubbs and
Ernest Tubbs.
yep, and today when I was getting ready this morning, I had some Chris Ledoux on, so I don't know, just kind of whatever. There's some cool new stuff out. I'm gonna go see Coulter Wall here in the next couple weeks. He's coming to Salt Lake, which is this dude that plays some pretty cool old Western music. He's from Canada, so there's a lot of good new music out there too.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Ernest Tubbs. See, that's a cool name. I've heard that name, but he must be kind of older school, like before. Is this like old school or kind of? I'm not totally familiar
It's old.
with him.
It's old. He's like 40s, 50s.
Oh, yeah,
I think I could be wrong on that, but
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to try to find the link and throw it in the show notes of some Ernest Tubbs if I can. I'll hopefully,
nice.
If I'm lucky. And everything else we talked about today, we definitely dug into I think some good stuff that I'll put some links out there. But yeah, if folks want to find you, the Gray Drake, and that's GREY Drake.com. Is that the best place?
Yep, that's it.
All right, Dan. Well, appreciate you coming on, and definitely appreciate you as a sponsor. This is, like we talked about, the cool thing is it's all connected, right? You're sponsoring the show, I'm sponsoring a good company, and you're sponsoring conservation, and and it's this cool circle. So I think if we get more people like yourself out there doing it, I think we'll be okay. And I think you touched on something, right? The challenge of the steelhead runs, right? They're in a little bit of a downslide right now, but I think there's stuff we can do to hopefully, when the ocean conditions change and things like that, they'll be in a better place. So. But yeah, we won't get deep into the conversation because I know that the funny thing is it distracts people. People don't want to hear the bad, right. That stuff. So, but yeah, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing and just being a supporter of the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.
All right, man. We'll talk to you later.
All right, take care.
So there you go. If you want to find all the show notes, all the links we covered, just go to wetflyswing.com/Drake. Head over to wetflyswing.com/destination to get more info on the upcoming trip to Alaska and potentially BC after that in 2020. You find out where you can get involved there. That's wetflyswing.com/DESTINATION. Thanks again for stopping by to check out the show today. I'm looking forward to catching up soon. I hope to maybe see you online or on the river.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com. And if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes.